Hello, I'm Mizzz Sally Pryde. When I was a child, I found great escapism in the world of Harry Potter. I wanted to be Hermione Granger. Now, that doesn't sound like a unique story, but for me, I couldn't tell anyone I wanted to be Hermione Granger because I thought there was something wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. I'm just transgender. And now, looking back, I see the irony in the situation there. Yes, JK Rowling is transphobic. I'm not going to go into that or debate it that much. There are lots of great videos online, and I will link a few in the description because they did a wonderful job on it, and frankly, I just don't have the energy for it. But it does leave me in this conflicted space of Harry Potter being such a great escapism in an early part of my gender awakening, but yet it's inextricably linked to JK Rowling. And part of the reason I made this video series is because I want to sort of take it back and give a guide as to how to do that. Now, before we get into how to actually take on transphobia, I think it's best we look back in our history. That's a good place to start. The saying, "those who fail to understand history are doomed to repeat it," is not just something your high school history teacher said before you failed the class. No, it has more deep meaning. It means that those who fail to understand the significance of history and what it actually represents are doomed to have repeated consequences later on and in the present. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is heavily based on magical history. And unsurprisingly, a lot of magical history has to do with magical and non-magical relations. And much like that, we as queer people, and specifically trans people in this case, we have a history of that. A lot of our history is about how we relate to cis people, cisgender people, otherwise known as people who are not transgender. And no, it's not a slur. We are exposed to the relations between magical and non-magical people right early on with two big ways in the start of the Chamber of Secrets. First, Harry gets an encounter with a house elf, who is, for lack of a better term, a slave. Because that's a thing that exists in the magical world. That led to a very close encounter of exposing magic. The other was a massive scale exposure of magic when Harry and his friend Ron decided to drive a car through the sky in front of a whole bunch of muggles. To them, this seems rather trivial at first. But then it becomes clear, why is this such a problem? As the school year goes on, they notice these sort of trends continue. They notice how Hermione Granger is treated differently because she was born to Muggle parents, and she's called terms like Mugblood. Mugblood is a slur in the magical community, and it is used to demean people who are born from Muggle parents. In the end, the hatred towards these people like Hermione Granger is not based on the fact that she is magical itself. No, it's that she's coming from a world of muggles. In reality, it really isn't about Hermione Granger. What it's about is the fact that her parents are muggles. And the people who don't like people like Hermione Granger are a result of the fact that they don't want muggles and magical people relating to each other in any sort of way. It is a hatred of muggles, first and foremost. Where can we draw parallels here? Well, people accused of being magical in the past, like in the Salem witch trials, have often been burned at the stake and put on literal witch trials. There is a clear parallel between the struggle of queer people, trans people, and those of magical people.
that the majority of society isn't meshing with these two communities. Now, when you take a history class, you often have 1 year to take it. There's a lot to cover there, so it's understandable why a few things slip through the cracks. Just because you didn't hear about trans people in your history class doesn't mean we don't exist. We've existed across all continents over all periods of time throughout humanity. So there have been many examples of trans people existing in cultures across the world. And on screen I'm just going to list a bunch of them because, frankly, I am terrible at pronouncing words. And, well, I don't want to embarrass myself. And on top of that, even if the culture hasn't been listed there, there's often a reason for that. We have to hide. We wouldn't document this part of ourselves down somewhere. And if we did, well, if someone ever found it, or after we die, someone finds it, oftentimes those things will just be destroyed. Now, I think a lot of transphobes get confused because their doctor tells them not to eat trans fats, but yet they're avoiding trans people. I think there's some level of confusion here. Seriously, transphobia is not only alive and thriving, it's ubiquitous. Seriously, I tried to find a dentist, and it was hard enough trying to find one who wouldn't misgender me. And seriously, that's just a basic level of human respect there. And like a lot of magical people who end up living among Muggle society, you live stealth, which doesn't mean we're tricking you, it just means we're hiding a piece of ourselves. That's often just for our own safety, because, frankly, we know what happens when we tell other people who we are. It's a dangerous world out there, and it's getting even more dangerous. After all, people don't understand unless we speak up. I speak up because people need to hear it. Trans lives matter, especially for Black people and people of color who are part of our community, because they are put at a much higher rate of being murdered. And unfortunately, the way the world is going, it will likely continue on that way for a while unless we speak up. How we are described is often blurred. The language we use nowadays isn't the language we used prior. A lot of times when we talk about trans people in history, there's a blurred line between cross-dressing and being transgender. One of the terms we could discuss here is drag. I'm trans and a drag queen. And to modern people, that might sound a little bit confusing. How can you do drag and be trans? Well, actually, historically speaking, a lot of the early drag queens were actually trans, like Marsha P. Johnson. Most people didn't know the difference back then. And I have a feeling a lot of people today don't know the difference either. One of the best examples of trans women in modern history is Wendy Carlos. She's a trans woman. She was out in the 70s, and she did the music for The Shining, Clockwork Orange, and Tron. And seriously, for all the transphobes out there who like to dead name people, just remember, if you look at the credits for The Shining, they actually use her real name. And she was out. She was an out trans woman at the time. Why does no one talk about this? Seriously, trans people, we've always existed. You just need to look harder. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and one of the great things about this is community. It's great to find community, and if you're willing to stay on board with this, part 3 is going to be about finding community. Thank you. Hope you subscribe. Thank you. Bye.